Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. And welcome back to another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. Again, I'm your host, Brad Minus, and I am extremely lucky and just overwhelmed right now with having Sophia Torrini with us. She's a clinical EFT practitioner. She's an NCS certified trainer. And if you don't know those acronyms, we're going to get there. I promise you. But either way, Sophia, how are you today?
I am very good. And thank you very much for the invite. And it's an honor to be on your show.
Oh, it's the honor and pleasure is all mine. But as I ask every guest, Sophia, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, the complement of your family, brothers and sisters, where you grew up, and what was it like to be Sophia as a kid?
So I was born in the States, in New York, and my parents were Greek that came to the States. And I was born in New York, out in Long Island, and my brother was already in boarding school when I was born. There were 4 kids. And then it was my sister, my other brother, and I'm the last. And I stayed till I was 5. My mother was not happy in the U.S. She wanted to go back to Greece. She's Greek. And I moved. My sister left when I was 2. She was sent to boarding school. So I pretty much grew with my other brother, who's 6 years apart from me. And the 2 of us went to Greece with my mom, and my father was left behind to close his practice. That took 7 years. So while I was in the U.S., I was pretty happy and content. But the transition to move to Greece and be put in 2nd grade, even though I could understand Greek, was a rough adjustment. And obviously I was missing my dad. And my mom had a lot of emotional challenges. So I have to say that the move to Greece was very traumatic and very challenging for me. And not having a father for pretty much 7 years. And the conditions had changed because my father took care of me. I was allowed to play. I had everything I wanted. And here now in Greece, he's trying to juggle 2 homes. And my mom had a lot of phobias. So it was challenging. I did well in school. And then I decided to go to a private all-girls school, just knowing how my mother would react if it was co-ed. And it was a very good decision. I must have intuitively picked it up. And the school was excellent because it had a lot of English, because the secondary language in Greek school is French. I spoke a little French, but for this school, it was English. And at some point, because the grading system is different, a grade 9, you decide if you're going to do sciences or if you're going to do the arts. So I chose the sciences. There were very few girls that chose the sciences. And I decided that I wanted to do my undergrad in chemistry. But I also wanted to return back to where I was born. Now, my dad had returned when I was 13, and things were okay. They weren't the greatest. Things were really rough, and he was significantly older. He had me when he was 52, so he was significantly older. My mom was 43 when she had me. So the parents were and I grew up with my brother, and I had this desire to flee. I just did not want to stay in Greece. I was not happy growing up. Let's put it that way. I did do 2 years at an American college there, and I excelled. And I wanted to see where I was born. So I came back to the States, but my parents did not agree. So I left my home with $250.
Oh my gosh. Can I ask what you said that your dad was closing his practice? What kind of practice was that?
He was a dentist.
Oh, okay. That makes sense why 7 years.
Yeah.
Because he's probably had a big clientele and he was probably torn between letting them go and stuff like that.
And my dad loved the States. He was born here, but had the same thing. He grew up all his life in Greece. So my dad loved the States.
It's so interesting that you said that you didn't like Greece, because to us, people that never been there, right? We're always thinking, oh, Greece, paradise, beaches and hills and old architecture and all that stuff. But to growing up in it, it was not what you thought it was. What was the biggest difference?
The difference is girls were treated a little different. And that was a challenge for me. Girls don't go to sciences. Girls don't do this. Before I left Greece, I bought a motorcycle. I was 18 years old and I had this big motorcycle, and it was looked upon as something odd. And also, people did not work after they finished high school. And I needed to find a way to buy my motorcycle, but also to leave the country. I had a plan. So when I got the job, the guy was very nice. I was a teacher of English. I said I was 18 because I finished high school when I was 17. And I lied, but he had hired me, and I ended up working for 2 years there. And he was a really good boss and a good employer. And all the kids passed. They had to take the TOEFL exam if they wanted to apply to a foreign school. So that's what I used to teach. And it was a good experience for me to practice my English. I knew English because I was born here, but then I didn't pick it up again till I was 8.
Okay, so you went to an all-girls secondary school.
Mm-hmm. Right after 7th and on. Yes, we call it high school. So I finished elementary in a co-ed, and then the other 6 years was in an all-girls school.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, that's a little different than what I've been hearing, because like some European countries call it secondary school. Some that you've got elementary, secondary, then go on to university, and then we call it high school, and then you called it high school as well. Okay, great. So that kind of gives a little bit of a nonchalant, trivial piece to anybody out there. And so, all right. So you said you went to an American college for 2 years.
There was a very good school. It was a continuation of the high school that I finished. And I had excellent professors. And then I decided to come to the States. I was accepted at various schools, but obviously I didn't have the funding. And my first year in the U.S. was very rough. I had a hard time finding a place to stay. I was going to stay with someone that I knew. It didn't work out. So I ended up cat sitting. And I would move till finally about a year or a year and a half later, I found this lovely girl who was a student at Columbia University. And I ended up sharing, I had the living room and she had the bedroom. She turned out to be an absolutely lovely person. And I had some temp jobs that I got. And then finally, a Greek physician said to me, why don't you come and work? I was already working for another Greek physician, an OBGYN, and he says, why don't you come and work for me? And I'll train you to become a manager, and I'll train you to do insurance. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I would go to Astoria, where the Greek community is, and work in dermatology. And he's still alive. He's an absolutely lovely man. And I worked for him for 7 years. And
that's a lot. That's how a lot of people get into healthcare, right? They get this idea, they get this back job, front desk or insurance and billing. And then they're like, oh, this is neat. And they get to get a taste of it. And they're like, wait a second. And then all of a sudden they move in. You find that EMTs become paramedics. And then all of a sudden they want to go to medical school. Billers that all of a sudden become administrators. And so it's pretty neat. Yeah, that's a common thread that we've been finding in the healthcare industry.
And he had a lovely nature. So he was into dermatopathology, and his care was not to sell products and do cosmetic stuff, but how to help patients. And a lot of them had some rare diseases. And I almost at the time was graduating, and I finished my chemistry. And then I thought, all the pharmaceuticals wanted me. And I said, I can't work in a lab by myself. I realized at this point, this is not for me. And I had done also some computer science on the side. So I temped for a little while, and then I ended up working for a methadone program in New York City.
So where did you end up going to school in the States?
I went to Hunter College.
Okay, Hunter College. Yeah, that's well known.
Yeah.
All right. So you got your chemistry degree, and they wanted you to go to the lab, and obviously you weren't ready for that. I know a lot of people with the chemistry degrees like that, pharmaceuticals, end up going into pharmaceutical sales, which is big dollars, huge. But it sounded like you were more interested in like helping people.
The healing aspect. My father had that attitude. There was something that happened as a child, I think, that impacted me. When I was 4 or 5, there was this little kid on the block we used to bike, and something happened. He bit his tongue, and he cut it in half.
Oh.
So I remember that, and my father took the kit in and stitched the tongue, and I remember witnessing it. And of course, the child ended up being fine. Even though he was a dentist, he decided to do that. In those days, you could do the Good Samaritan work, because we're talking before 1970, and I just appreciated it. I also had an accident, and I saw how my father handled it so calmly. I used to play, there was a door, and it was a glass door. You had your wood door and the glass door, and there were 2 steps to go out to the street. And as soon as you opened the door. And so I would run from his living room where the clients were, the waiting area, I should say, and press the door, and the door would swing open, and I would jump the 2 steps. The last patient that came in locked the door. So I went through the glass.
Oh.
Yes. And the client started screaming, but I do remember so clearly, my father came out so calm. He took the big glasses off, wrapped towels so the bleeding would stop, and then he took me to the hospital. And the calmness that he had, I think, intrigued me. And it left me a very positive image without the screaming, without panicking. Why did you do it? There was no questions. Now, my mother went crazy. That's a different story. But I ended up having a collar for about a whole month, and I was very lucky because it would have cut my trach. But I think that left me an impact, and I always knew there was a healing attitude. So when I realized chemistry is not the thing, I took some nutrition classes. I was very fortunate to have a doctor that I knew at Columbia Presbyterian. He says, you know what? Why don't you come a day and spend a day on the nutrition floor? And when I saw it was just managing the food, I said, no, there's no way I could do this. So that was out. And I ended up getting a job in methadone maintenance. And so I liked it. I did a lot of administrative work, a lot of computer work, and then supervising people. And I had a very lovely boss who's still my friend today after so many years. And I decided then afterwards I was going to do my master's.
Nice. Let's kind of just step back real quick. Just so you said it's methadone maintenance. Correct. Can you explain to me what that is, please?
Yes. Methadone is a synthetic medication we give people who are addicted on heroin, but we maintain them. So they would come every day in the clinic every morning, take their methadone. So it blocks your desire to want heroin.
Okay. So it helps them through withdrawals and
yeah. The program, though, that was designed, and there were 23 clinics, and I would oversee these clinics, and we're talking, we had 9,000 patients. So we had a pretty big census, and it was a pretty big job for me. Very good job for me. And I learned a lot seeing what the medical model looks like.
With methadone maintenance, I'm just curious. We're gonna keep going, but I'm just absolutely curious about the methadone. What was at the time, and I know this was a little while ago, what was the success factor on somebody being on methadone versus somebody doing cold turkey? Or
I will discuss that when I finish my master's degree.
Oh, okay.
It was very It wasn't. They were maintained for most of their life, and then eventually the patients would die from secondary ailments. There was a very small, it was less than 10%, if I remember well, that could wean off and move on. And just since you asked the question, it is a little bit humiliating for the person who's addicted, because they come every morning before 7 o'clock if they're working, and they have to be in front of a nurse to see that they're swallowing their medication, because a lot of people sold it. And you have to come in and you're dependent to this thing every morning, and they urine test you regularly because heroin addicts don't easily give up heroin. So, and there was a big population that would find ways to, first it was pill and then we went liquid, but somehow even managed the liquid to spit it out and then sell it. It was crazy stuff. And then some of the nurses, we had to put, once we went to liquid methadone, we had to test to make sure that the methadone that they were given wasn't diluted and no one was taking the methadone. So on the side of the clinic, a few blocks away, there was heavy selling on Friday night. So you would sell the methadone to get heroin or get something else.
Oh, geez. So methadone was there to make sure that they're going to be able to get better, and they were supposed to be able to like wean off of it, but it ended up being addicted to either methadone or finding a way to sell the methadone so they can get real heroin. Oh, wow. What a catch-22.
But there was a good group of patients. I can't remember if it was 10 or 15%, and it was an honor. It was given to me. It was a real honor. It was given. They were called aftercare. So these were patients who actually turned their life around. Let's see what the number is. It was 150 patients, I think, from the 8,000. So that's a very small number, right? That I would review their charts, and they would come and pick up their methadone for 15 days. So every 15 days, they would come and pick up their methadone and take it home. And they turned out to be very successful. CEOs for big companies, they literally had turned their life around. But it was a very small number.
That's amazing, right? Because here you are trying to manage people getting one dose at a time every day, yet you give 15 doses to somebody who really wants it, and they don't sell it or anything. They use it and they become successful. That is such a dichotomy. But it does make sense. Somebody who wants it, somebody who really wants it, they stick to a program. The program works. So what did you end up getting your master's in?
I got my master's in public health and epidemiology. So I decided, I got accepted to a few schools, and I went and visited a couple in Scotland and also in the UK. I was accepted in the US. I wanted an education similar to the Greek educational system. So there's a difference. In the US, we do multiple choice, and your master's here is you do your master's, and then at the end, you either do a test, a cumulative test, and you got your master's. And I think at the time there was, or an option of a thesis. Now in the UK, you have to do both. The difference was it wasn't multiple choice, and they wanted to see your critical thinking, which is what I had been raised. So what I have to say from my Greek culture, I learned critical thinking. So when you had a problem in school, I had never seen multiple choice till I came in the US. I didn't even know what it was. You had to derive your answer. So all of your tests were derivation. And it was similar in the UK. So I was drawn to that, and I ended up going to the University of Edinburgh. Now, I gave my notice. My boss said, I can't hold your position for 2 years. So when you find something else.
Wow. So talk about changes in life. Start in the U.S., love it. Go to Greece, not crazy about it. Come back to the States. You got successful, and now you're going to Edinburgh. A whole new change. What was that like?
I loved Edinburgh. I loved Edinburgh. The people were great. The school was exceptional. The only thing that sucked was the weather. It was dark all the time. And it was very depressing. Other than that, my experience in Scotland was great till it was time to do my thesis. And here's where the big challenge happens. So when you do your master's, they want you to do a literature review. And I'll explain what a literature review is. Since the degree was in epidemiology, and epidemiology is the study of diseases, and it has a lot of statistics, you just look what other people did and just you write what they did. You compare studies. And so my tutor was a very prominent big name that worked for the national health system there. And I said to her, I am not doing a literature review. I said, what's the purpose? I wanted to do it in methadone maintenance. I said, what's the purpose to rehash what was already done? I already started seeing there was something wrong in the methadone maintenance program. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew there was something wrong. So she turned around and she said, if you don't do the literature review, you're thrown out of the program. So I said, I'm not doing it. So I get thrown, you could get a diploma. I get thrown out of the program. So the registrar, my boyfriend, and a friend of mine gave me two options. Either agree or just do your diploma and suck it up. And I said, I didn't come all the way from the other side of the pond to get a diploma. I thought I was going to stay in methadone maintenance at the times. So I thought it through. I decided to go to the chair of the department. I made a few meetings. He was an absolutely lovely man. And I says, what would you like to do? I said, I want to do a critical appraisal of the effectiveness of methadone maintenance on patients. He says, that's a super big task. I said, that's what I want to do. I said, if I end up working in methadone maintenance, I really need to know if methadone maintenance is effective. I do not believe in methadone. If methadone is effective, I do not believe in the maintenance model, which is 20, 30 years staying on it, because that's another addiction. So there was some back and forth, and he says, there's no tutors left. I can give you a PhD student who can tutor you. And then I would review. And if you don't pass, then you lost your opportunity. And since this went back and forth for about a month or two, I had to extend my stay for 2 more months. And so I said yes. The tutor was a lovely woman from Australia. I ended up working day and night, and I did pass. And what came out of it was very interesting. And I found out 20 years later, they implemented it in Scotland, actually more than 20 years later. So the research indicated that methadone maintenance on its own is not effective. You would have to give them social skills, occupational therapy, some emotional support, and some other support for between 2 and 5 years. So by anywhere between 2 and 5 years, you would have to wean them off. And there's a way to wean them off from methadone. You can't just wean them off just like that, because they're going to go through withdrawal, and it's a pretty bad withdrawal. But the key part is what they can stay on is 2 to 5 years max. But the other services are absolutely necessary in order for the person to be rehabilitated. You've not give them occupational therapy. You've not addressed their emotional needs. You have to give them some vocational support, some other skills for them to cope.
That's really astute. And I have to totally praise you for that. Just the idea, your vision of it, right? Knowing that this literary review was absolutely doing nothing for you, and deciding that, hey, you know what, you're going to risk all of the schooling that you've done, not get your degree, because you're passionate about getting this review done. And I got to praise you for that, because not a lot of people would have the courage to sit there and say, hey, listen, I don't get, this is not going to help me, and it's not going to help you any for me to do that. But this can help a lot of people So let me do this. And so I got to praise you. I got to praise your chapter or the department head that you worked with. And
Absolutely,
wow.
guy. Absolutely. I think his name is Dr. Folks. Absolutely a lovely man. And he would meet with me at night, and the tutor was superb. And then my classmates graduated in the summer. I graduated at the end of November. It didn't matter. And before I graduated, I get a call at a random from my boss I worked here at Beth Israel. And he called me back, says, I have a new position for you if you want to come back. So I come back and I said, I will only work under you. So I ended up working, and I did a lot of computer work as well, which I loved. I had this desire, and I would do some billing reports, and I would set up. There was Fortran in those days.
Oh my God. I can't believe you just said Fortran. That's hilarious. I'm in the IT field outside of coaching endurance athletes.
Oh, wonderful.
So when you said that is that's a blast from the past. Formula transfer. Fortran. Wow.
And I did some assembly at Hunter. I would read the dump. I had a minor in computer science. So
right.
I always had an interest for both. So I get the job, and then he leaves. And the new boss, who I knew, I could not deal with. It was just pushing paperwork. And he was very innovative. He really cared for the patients. And so I get recruited to go to Greece to set up the methadone program in Athens. And so I end up going, but I did not last. I stayed 30 days, and I just packed my stuff. And it was a heartbreak for me to leave because I loved my parents, right, but I could not fit in the system. The system was not catered really to help the patients. So I said no. And then obviously I was very young, and then they needed favors on the side of other nature that I don't want to discuss on the show. And I said, I have to get out of here. So I felt bad because my father had gotten sick. So I left.
Wow, because the way you talked about Greece, I know the idea of you starting a brand new methadone program was probably completely totally up your alley, totally something what you wanted to do. But with the way you talked about how you felt in Greece, it's almost surprising to say that you actually even went back. So that's super interesting. It's your power to help the people overpowered your sense of environment.
The culture is absolutely lovely. The family system is very good. Rules and regulation are whatever the politician wants. So, and I think the limitation as a child growing up or a teenager is I had other ideas. So it was a very structured, you have to fit the norm. The female has to behave a certain way. I have nothing against the people in their hearts, and their kindness is superb, absolutely superb. And one thing is they know how to enjoy life. And the food is very good. My challenge was the girl or the female had to follow those rules. Otherwise, it was frowned upon. And that, I think, was my challenge, or to have other ideas. No, it can't be done this way. I think I intuitively was picking up because my schooling in Greece was superb. I cannot say anything about my whole years of schooling. My education was 10 times excellent. I don't think I could have had this education in the U.S. I think it was this thing, you have to fit in your role. That was my challenge. And you can't have other ideas. At the time, we were all being raised as Greek Orthodox. And I clashed with the strict religion. I think that it's not that I had anything against the people. The people, I still go back and visit. I have friends. I have my elementary girlfriend, and I have other friends that I've kept for all my life. It was being different and not doing the status quo. I think that was the challenge.
So were you saying that if you were to stay in Greece, that you probably wouldn't be able to do what you're doing now, or even be able to complete what you wanted to complete? I get that. Is it still that way?
It's opening up, but there's no openness. Like here, people are really open for alternative modalities.
Right.
That still has not, if the doctor said something, that is it. You need to follow what the doctor, not even think about another possibility. And I think that's where my challenge is. It has nothing to do with, they've been programmed in a certain way. And the growing up was so homogeneous that the correct God was Greek Orthodox. And I answered one day, and they frowned up. I was pretty much young. I said, I personally did not meet Jesus. How do I know this is the right thing? Once I meet him, I said, I'll make that decision. Now I believe in Christ consciousness. I do not believe in a religion. I believe in the divine is in the person.
I you know what, I'm like right there with you on that. So I grew up Jewish, actually, and I still was catered to that as well. So that's something we have in common. All right, so you leave Greece, and you weren't there that long, that you said, but there was reasons for it. And what did you end up come back to the States?
Yeah, and I tempted for a while, and I become a network engineer for Novell. And
wow, now you're really going back. Novell, wow.
And I became both an engineer and an administrator. I did 4, 5, and 6, and I really loved it. But I could not see myself working in the field, and I ended up then going back to healthcare. I think that was my thing. And I tempted, which was actually a very good experience. For several years, I would have temp jobs where I'd work 3 months or a year, and I did various modalities. And then I ended up going to a hospital setting, to a major institution in New York City where I worked. And then I stayed in medicine till I became an EFT practitioner.
Okay. So what were you doing as in New York? What did you end up doing?
Usually office manager jobs, doing the billing, overseeing, and I worked in cancer. I worked in gastroenterology. I worked in plastics. So I worked in orthopedics, and then I ended up working in cardiology for 7 years. We had 59 physicians at the time, so it was a big department. And we created also a private diagnostic department, which was great for me because I still believed in the medical model, but I believed in preventive medicine. So there was this private program, and I loved that. And then I switched to another department, and having seen all the way what they asked the patients to pre-authorize and whatever, and turning the patient away if they didn't have the pre-authorization, I designed what they now have, the concept of a medical record, because I had been a patient at the Mayo Clinic. And so I saw how seamless it was going to the Mayo. They had some paperwork that you did it by hand, but then when you went into the Mayo, they were moving to electronic. So I was thoroughly impressed, and it was very hard to change the hospital system, but my department finally did that, and we integrated it to what they call the Epic EMR. That was warm, but we did do it, and we were the first department.
What? Epic?
Yeah.
Holy crap. I'm sorry. I helped Tampa General Hospital implement Epic. And then I did a couple of upgrades. I was a project manager and helping get a couple of upgrades done. And then I was doing training and everything. I was helping facilitate training on Epic. Wow, what a small world. Because Epic's amazing. It's one of them. I think it's, and even the corporation itself, it's literally like a mini Google over there in Kansas.
It is. So in 2005 and 4, they had all this stuff in Epic, but you had to come into the hospital to fill out the forms. My whole thing was to pre-authorize it. So I wasn't super good, but I wrote a query in DBMS with a friend of mine that when the patient got registered on the phone, it would go and check if the boxes, because it was IDX to Epic, so that we didn't have Epic, the whole thing. Epic was the EMR. The registration is an old, antiquated system, IDX, and there was Ward to push it out. So someone helped me to write a DBMS query, and since I had done some languaging, it worked great. So there was a report that would come 3 days out to the registration team saying, the insurance is not right, or the insurance is right, this is their copay, and here's the pre-authorization. So that reduced our no-show, reduced pushing the clients away, and the flow, because we saw in a small department, we saw 98 to 100 and something patients a day.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Holy moly. So, but you were at the Mayo Clinic for a reason.
Yes. So prior to getting the job, just before I got hired for the hospital setting, I was not really happy in my life. I always kept myself busy because I didn't know how to handle my emotions. So I had a very abrupt ending with my significant other that put me in a spiral. And I did not know how to process my emotions at all. And I'm looping for 3 years, and I really am not happy. And I just wanted out. I could not see a future, even though I had many partners before, but something about this particular situation, and I just couldn't get an out of me. So all of a sudden, and I would never go to the hospital or ever get sick. I was never sick. I was exceptionally healthy. I used to run every day, and I'm in severe pain. And a friend nurse says, you need to go to the hospital. I was resistant. I could barely get out of bed. Literally, there was so much pain. And my physician, I called him because the pain was in the abdomen. Great physician. He says, I'm going fishing. I said, please. He says, I can't see you. I said, and my boss, who was a surgeon, said, you need to go to the hospital. He was actually visiting Florida for a conference for a day or two. And my friend nurse takes me and they say, you need to be operated right now. And first they said I had appendicitis. I said, no. Then they came up with other things. I said, you have it wrong. And then they said, you have interception. And I said, no, I don't meet the criteria. I don't meet the H group. No, this is what you have. I was already now on morphine. I consented to a surgery I did not need.
Oh, geez. And just the fact that you had been around it. And this is what I was talking about before, is people start in a very small position, a very entry-level position, and all of a sudden they get really interested. Mm-hmm. And they start taking in all that knowledge. And that's just like what you did, because you knew as they were pledging all these different diagnoses to you, which to me, that was the fact that they kept getting it wrong. That's a red flag. But the fact that, but you're still in pain. So
I was in excruciating pain, but I didn't match the criteria. It's a condition that happens in babies or people who are in their 80s or 70s. And I was in my 40s. I was actually turning 40. So the surgery takes place. I go unconscious. I was going to be reopened again because they took up my organs, put them back in. They couldn't find this interception. And I developed secondary conditions. To make a long story short, my lungs collapsed. I got pleural effusions. I got septic. I had a fever from before. That I did have, but now I can't breathe. And I did not like the mask and the stuff, and I wasn't a very compliant. I couldn't breathe with it. And they said, you have a few days to live. And my boss came to me, says, you need to make arrangements. I can't be the one to do it. My brother was in Greece. So at that point, I was so depressed. I said, I don't really care. I might as well just go. I'm out of this world. But somehow I'm not dead yet. And then my brother comes, and then a lovely nurse, was her last day on the floor. I think she was an angel sent. And she said, you're not coming alive out of this floor unless you do your own intervention. I know you're very bright, both of you, and you need to figure out what you're going to do. So we researched some weird stuff. There was clash within the hospital, and the hospital wanted me to force my brother to leave because he was a dentist. But my brother had already done some veterinary before, and he had general medicine. And on day 22, we asked for this. There were some complications. They gave me some medication. My heart almost stopped. They had to give me an antidote. The bottom line is I was in pretty bad shape. And a week before, my brother's, because I was on morphine, maybe it was 10 days before, and I'm being cautious to say this on this, but I started not taking my pills. And then my brother would bring me some Xanax from home because of the pain. And I would put the pills under the pillow, and he would take and throw them in the garbage. And then he removed my IVs. And there was a blood transfusion that I reacted, and he did not want me to have the second blood transfusion. He stopped the heparin because I was bleeding. And now I'm 93 pounds. I'm 127, so you can imagine. Yeah. Pretty bad shape. But we did get neostigmine, and kindly enough, after a lot of force, it was my boss's son who gave it to me, because I literally forced them. A surgeon has to give them. He was a gastroenterologist. I said, I worked for your dad. I've done all these favors. You need to do something. I literally cornered him, and he gave me a double dose. And your body's supposed to return in 20 minutes, but it did. It returned in 8 hours, and they wanted to operate. So the head chair of the department says, didn't work. We're going to remove your intestine. And my brother and I cursed and said, over my dead body. He says, by Monday, she'll burst. He says, if she burst by Monday, this was a Friday. And my brother gets angry, and he says, give her a chance. Her body hasn't worked in 22 days. I know what the textbook says. 8 hours later, there was some life back in the organs because the organs were shutting down. And then we forced for a discharge, but I ended up having health challenges later on. And that's what took place. But I did get discharged 23 days later.
So they tell you you've got this inception, and they keep giving you possible diagnosis. They come up with this. They do this surgery. It wasn't the right thing. And now you're still in pain, and you got morphine. And I kept thinking to yourself, you kept putting you on morphine. I'm thinking, she's going to have to do her own methadone program. Yeah. And you finally get some intersection with your boss's son and your brother, and they get you back to being close. And then you decide that, all right, I'm out. AMA, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I'm out of there. But I learned how to spit my pills from my methadone.
Yeah.
My methadone maintenance clients, they had the tricks, because the nurse would come and she says, let me see you swallow it. And I just knew the pills were making me sick. And yes, the morphine I loved. It would give me a high. But I knew eventually, I don't know if that we give to end stages, people morphine. And I had already been 20-something days. So my breathing was getting so shallow. Right. I could not breathe anymore. And so that's when my brother said, you have to find another way to deal with the pain. So the only thing I had with something at home, whatever I had. But the nurse was very instrumental for him. It was her last day on the floor. And she whispered in my ear, this is what you need to do. And I then come out for 2 years I do go back to work, being miserable, having issues. And everyone kept on telling me you have to remove organs. And I would say, no. And I go to the Mayo and I love it. I would have to go 3 times a year, stay 2 weeks at a time, try to do some rehabilitation, and I would cope. I wasn't miserable, but I would cope.
It just, the pain and the uncomfortableness just became part of life, and you just learned to live with it.
And whenever I would stress, I would get these major flare-ups. And having worked in the hospital and having had a connection, I got in because the waiting list was close to 2 years. I had already applied. Then I used the connection and I got in 6 months. And I got in to the best person that could have been suited for me. Open-minded, really very loving, the best person I could have picked. It was great. And then this experimental drug came in and you couldn't get it in the U.S. And I had a patient who was in the UK. She got it from the UK, shipped it to me, then customs stopped it. And I stayed on the medication for a while. It was very hard to get a non-FDA approved medication.
Right. And that medication, did that turn everything around for you, or did it just make it a lot easier to
make it a lot easier? I would have a lot of headaches and side effects, but I could function and I could cope. So my organs were working well till I'm highly stressed again in 2016, and now nothing's working. So I go back to the Mayo twice, and pretty much my medications are not working. And at this point, my quality of life was deteriorating. I can't eat and I can't do stuff.
Wow.
I said, there has to be another way. Because now the choice, I'm not going to die tomorrow, but it's going to be a progressive, miserable death. So, and my partner was so loving. Same partner that I was devastated from years ago, we ended up coming back together. And it was the best support I could have ever had. And he looked at me and he said, did you ever consider if you're gone, how it's going to affect me? And that was the turning point. That was the turning point. I said, there has to be another way.
So what did you do? What did you go about? How did you go about researching that?
I started researching alternative, but I do want to add one thing. When I had these crazy ideas, all my Greek friends said, just remove your organ. And he would say, when I ended up at the Mayo, you do. I know you're going to figure it out. You do what's right for you. So he always supported my ideas, which I think was very instrumental. So when I decided to stop doing certain tests and whatever, he says, if you feel let them know, don't do them. And I didn't do them. So I went online and I did some research and I bumped into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work.
Dr. Joe Dispenza, yes.
And I read all 4 books and I would repeat it to my partner. He says, you're really into this. I said, I don't know, something about this is really making a lot of sense. So I tried to get into an event. It was sold out. I had to fly to Brighton. I had a huge transformational experience that lasted for 2.5 months, but I cannot process or embody, master your emotions. That was very difficult for me to grasp at the time.
Right.
And he said, even if you heal, if you do not master your emotions in your body, the condition is going to come and it's going to come worse. That's exactly what happened to me. And so I am now more miserable than before. And my ex-boyfriend's sister, who was Jewish, the mother called me. They had just finished Shiva. The daughter had died from a similar condition.
Mm.
And I went into panic and I went into fear. So my life spiraled, and she was younger than me.
Right.
So I found this lovely, I had tried EFT before, and I said, this is crazy. I don't even understand how this stuff works.
Right.
I found this lovely practitioner who was a very tough cookie, absolutely what I needed. And she says, you need to let go of your anger. You're going to need to forgive. So what do you mean forgive? What they did to me? Forgive? And she said, yeah. I ended up doing all the above. And then I got off my meds. Took me 8 months.
Okay, so we covered a couple of things, and it's in the title of your titles down here. So EFT, that's emotional function training.
EFT, emotional freedom technique, and the reason it's called EFT because it's the one that we measure. So we do clinical trials on it. So
emotional freedom technique. So can you give us a little bit of definition of what that entails?
Absolutely. So let me give a preface from what I understand from Dr. Joe's work, and I'm also a firm believer. The body is electric, and it has an electromagnetic field around it. And the cells communicate with electrical charges. When the charges don't communicate well between, and there's not a certain voltage, there's static and deterioration on the body. So all disease is a lowering of frequency. When the person dies, what do? We take 2 paddles and we put it on their heart to revive them. And I want to give something more to you. I'm sure you remember the old Walkmans.
Yeah.
And you would put a battery in there, and if you left it 6 months or 2 years, what would happen to the battery? Do you remember?
Yeah, it would degrade, and it wouldn't work.
It would acidify in this fluid.
Right.
That's what happens when the emotions in the body are not processed energetically. So they acidify, they calcify, and we often find calcification in the arteries. So emotions not being, what are emotions? It's energy in motion. And what is energy is information. So the emotion is carrying information. Emotions are meant to be felt and let go, not meant to ruminate on, which is what I did before I got sick. I was ruminating on my emotions. I'm the one who brought up the illness unconsciously to myself because I couldn't break free from my limiting thoughts and beliefs.
That is a total paradigm shift. When we think of this, we think of psychiatry, psychology, and the whole bit is this, hey, this is just these emotions that we have. It really has no physiology to it. It's like, all right, id, ego, you just need to change the way you think and get rid of this and blah, blah, blah. But there's actually a science behind it. It makes a lot more sense when you say it. That we have to look at these emotional responses as electricity and as an electrical message. And the message is supposed to go from one place to the other. So you process the information and then let it go.
Correct.
And that's what it's meant to do. But we have a lot of us, just the fact that people that hold grudges, that stirring, that degrading of emotions that's within you.
Absolutely. So let me make one minor correction. So the thoughts are electrical. The emotion, when you have a wire, and I'm sure you know it from computers, around the wire, there's an electromagnetic field. So the electrical wire creates an electromagnetic field. The emotions are electromagnetic.
Okay.
So an emotion holds many thoughts and limiting beliefs. And I will address what EFT is once I give this explanation. So when you're angry, actually, when you have a limiting thought, I can't believe he did it. How dare they do it to me? Right. And you keep on ruminating on that. Neurotransmitters, neuropeptides get released from the brain, from your limbic brain to be exact, from your neocortex to your limbic, and they go down your spinal cord and they activate the hormonal system. And what do? It goes down your spinal cord and you have two adrenal glands. It starts squirting adrenaline. Once you have adrenaline, now you're in the loop. Now, there's a secondary thing that happens so besides being stuck in the loop where you can't get off the looping thoughts because the cycle is not broken, you've activated your sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system now is going to produce cortisol, and we know what cortisol does. So now you're headed for disease. Right. So that's what I did prior to getting sick. I was just doing this unconsciously. So EFT, what is it? It's a combination between cognitive therapy and tapping on the acupressure or meridian points around the body to shift or to move energy. And what EFT does, the research indicates, it downregulates six genes of stress. One of them is cortisol. It resets the amygdala, which is your fear center. And for traumatic memories, there's a way to process them. They are reset in the hippocampus because you're always replaying your past in your head. And you're predicting your future based on your past. All you need to do is take your past and replaster it in the future with new characters. Because that's what we're doing when we're looping. You always anticipate the worst case scenario, and before you know it, the worst case scenario has happened.
Interesting. So we're actually manifesting our own future if we remain in that loop.
The same way I manifested those unfortunate conditions, I kept on saying, I want out. What did I attract? An experience that was going to take me out. That's all I kept on saying. I want out. I can't take this. I can't process this. I want out. I got something. It took 3 years, but I almost got out.
Oh, that's incredible. That's that whole adage of if you think you can't, you won't. If you think you can, you will.
Correct.
Now that makes a lot more sense now to me. Because again, we think of thoughts and feelings as just that. It's just thoughts and feelings, and you can think about it, you can get rid of it or not. But for those that do, you're actually hurting yourself.
Correct.
That's incredible.
Even if they're not manifesting, let's assume you don't buy into that model. Though we do know that there's a few experiments in neuroscience that the brain knows about 6 seconds before what image is going to be projected, and it's changed in the brain. So if it's a negative image, the fear center gets activated. So the brain already knows, and neuroscience has proven these. So these are not spiritual teachings. And we do know, because we use electrocephalograms, we do know that the thought is electrical. And we can measure the toroidal field around the body. So that is measurable. And there was a famous physician called Dr. David Hawkins, a psychiatrist, who did the maps of consciousness and measured the frequency for every emotion. And he said, anything below courage, which was fear, apathy, angry, judgment, is life depleting. Everything above that is now enabling the body. And I can go a little bit more into it, but let's finish what EFT. So EFT is a modality that helps you feel the emotion and let it go. And emotions are meant to last 90 seconds to 2 minutes when we don't ruminate on them. It takes a while to get there, and you just feel them, and people feel the energy either going up or going down, or they feel a knot. A lot of people, when they're anxious, they get a knot in their stomach, and they can feel that. And a Chinese medicine has associated an organ for each emotion. So liver holds anger, the kidneys hold fear, the hearts hold heartache, and certain conditions have an emotional story besides it. So I also had pneumonia in the hospital. So pneumonia is feeling powerless and being attacked from the world and not being able to cope. So that's where EFT with some other modalities, which is called metaconsciousness, tie in together, and the person can start healing those emotional blocks in their body.
I'm flabbergasted here. I'm mind blown. The idea that you had mentioned that emotions were meant to be felt and let go in 90 seconds to 2 minutes. I always tell my clients, I'm like, when you cross the finish line and you're really angry at how you did, you're just basically, I can't believe I did it that way. I feel like I failed and blah, blah, blah. And I always tell them, I'm like, all right, you're allowed to yell, scream, and cry for 20 minutes. And then you need to let go and start thinking about the next race. And I say the same thing about the other side as well. If they came across it and they hit their goal and they're excited, you know what I mean? I say the same thing because there's always another goal to hit. Let's go up. Savor it for 20 minutes and then go. Now you got me thinking. Now I need to tell them, all right, no, you get 90 seconds to 2 minutes on the negative side, and you get 20 minutes on the positive side.
You can't do that in the beginning. So eventually this is going to come naturally. In the beginning, my anger would last for weeks.
Right.
Okay, so then I shortened down to days. Now, I don't always get, like this morning, depends on what emotion. This morning in meditation, I was able to see the grief come and leave when you sit with the body. The key here is not to tell, we can just tell them how long they're meant to last, but we can't force them to it because they have so much accumulated emotion from before, and it's a learning experience. So the focus should be, once they're aware, how long you're going to stay in it, and then let them, the person, because I went down gradually.
Progressively, yeah.
You can't, the person can't, because now we're going to shut them down. What do you mean? I can't do it in 90 minutes. Brad is nuts. What do you say? 90 seconds. What is he saying? There's no emotion that can go. To take it further advanced, the Buddha has some information where he breathes into the emotions and he pushes it out. I am not as evolved to that point to do that yet. But that's the ultimate goal.
All right. Okay. So that I will say that when I was given that, when I was told, hey, listen, you're done with the race, you didn't feel good about it, and you just feel like you just totally failed, you get 20 minutes. That was the best advice I ever got. One of the best advice I ever got, because I literally timed myself. I come across and I'm like, God dang it. And my coach was like, you're allowed to yell, scream, cry, blah, 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 whatever you need to do. But when that timer goes up at 20 minutes, and sign for you to start looking forward at that point. And that was some of the best advice, because I would ruminate it on for weeks. Now, it wouldn't be as emotional. It wouldn't be like pulling at my heartstrings or anything. It would still be there. Like every time I'd think about how badly I did or where I tended to fail myself, it would still tug here. But afterwards, when I was finally given this told, hey, set a timer, you get 20 minutes and you're done, I would still maintain the lessons, but it wouldn't feel it. I wouldn't feel it anymore. It would just be, okay, this is what you did. This is why I came here. So let's put some training sessions together so we can get better, stronger, faster in that situation. So the next time you're in that situation, you won't have to go through what you did. So when you cross the finish line, you come back and you're smiling again. That's what we want, right? And that's what I tell my clients. I'm like, I don't care how you did, what the time was and everything else, but I want you coming across the finish line smiling. If you're coming across suffering, that's not an emotion that we want. We want you to come across smiling. So you might not have done as well as you did the day before, but you felt great. That's personally my methodology.
It's an excellent methodology. And the key here is you gave them something reasonable, 20 minutes, and we call that the refractory period. That's what it's
refractory period. Okay, cool.
So it's considered emotional intelligence, being aware of what it is. And they're going to say, I'm not going to stay in that. And eventually after the 20 minutes, you're guiding them to something positive. Now let's address why this is crucial. So when you're in an angry state or these other emotions that are lower in frequency on the map of consciousness, anything below 200, your brain waves are beta brain waves. And person, when in beta brain waves, cannot see solutions. The voice in the head is in your head and you can hear it 24/7 judging you. And the body now is already in a sympathetic mode. There is no healing that can take place. Why? Because when you're in the sympathetic mode, we were programmed based on survival, the blood to go to the extremities, the pupils to dilate, and the gastric juices to stop down, to slow down. So what does it do to the body? There's no way you can digest any food. Why most people nowadays have all these conditions digestive-wise. So we unconsciously have activated the sympathetic nervous system by thought, through our emotion, by feeling angry, or shame is actually even worse than anger because it's more life-depleting on the maps of consciousness. And there's no way the body is going to heal because when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, it's designed to do three things: to run, to hide, or to fight, because it was created if a tiger was going to chase you. But in this case, it's not the tiger, it's your coworker who activated you, and you think it's normal to ruminate. And we watch these reality shows and we watch all the stuff on TV and we think it's okay. And I'm going to use something from Dr. Joe's work. When psychology tells us that these feelings are normal, they're not. Your true essence is meant to be in joy and peace. That's what you were created in the image of divinity. That is your true state. Unfortunately, that is not where we are. So how do we change it? Just exactly as you said. But we want to change our brainwaves. That is the key thing. So athletes go into a flow and go into a zone. Their brainwaves is an alpha. That's when they can mentally see stuff, visualize something, or imagine something. It doesn't have to be visualization. And what do they do before a race? They play the race as them succeeding, but they also watch where can they be an obstacle just in case it hits. So they're doing a mental rehearsal so they can be perfect. That is exactly what they're doing. And there's an experiment that actually shows that mental rehearsal is as effective as real practice because the body doesn't know the difference if it's a real life experience or by thought alone. So now you have the person in alpha brains, the sympathetic nervous system has been turned off. Now you have the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So the blood returns back into the internal organs. And where are most of the diseases? Inside the internal organs, because the blood has gone to the extremities. There's no blood flow.
That's genius. So we want to be activating our parasympathetic nervous system. Not that our sympathetic nervous system is not going to be activated at some point, but we need to temper that down. So techniques that the meditation those are these techniques to actually activate the parasympathetic.
Change your brain waves first. EFT releases emotions and it puts you often in an alpha state. Breath work, but when we talk about breath work, you've seen a person who's anxious. They see something. Guess what happened? That traumatic image did not flow to leave. It got stored in my tissue because the breath stopped where my diaphragm is.
Right.
What do the yogis do? They do a full cyclical breath. They always breathe in the belly. Why did the Buddha have a belly? Not because he was fat, because he had learned to push the breath into his belly, which is why breath work is another excellent modality to release for releasing emotions. So EFT is a fast one. Breath work is as equivalent, depending what the person. I often use both, but I personally have found, and the research has found, that EFT is one of the fastest. There's other techniques. There's a lovely technique, the somatic experience by Peter Levine, who's a physician, where they take you through a process and you observe and feel the emotion in the body. Now, the difference between us and animals is if you have a cat or a dog, mostly a dog, if the dog gets scared, or let's say it's a bear, and you can research it and you'll find videos online, chased by a tiger, it will activate its sympathetic nervous system. But after the tiger and it's back into safety, the bear gets up and starts shaking to release that energy that it wasn't able to release while it was being chased. Unfortunately, humans have not been taught to release energy. Now, when you start tapping or even breath work, you will notice people start shaking. I started shaking my first year in EFT. I no longer shake because the energy was stuck and it's trying to find a way to leave.
Wow. This is some really interesting. It's amazing. It's amazing what you're talking about, because it really shifts a paradigm into this consciousness of energy, which in Western medicine, they've been talking about the chi for years and years and decades and civilizations and centuries. And now we've come into different methods of that same type of energy transfer.
It is exactly. And what did acupuncture was trying to do?
Right.
Release the electrical charge, where EFT is a little more effective, and both work, right, is the personality, the ego, which is our programmed self. It's not your true self. Right. And I can tie it in for you in the Bible to explain that as well. Needs to speak up, because if you repress your personality to not speak your story, it's like pushing down or blocking a child to speak. It's going to start screaming and it will do a temper tantrum. So EFT combines both. You allow that voice, those traumas from early childhood, because all of your traumas, you asked me about my upbringing, all of my patterns were created by the ages from 1, they usually say, to 7. And the reason they say is because your brain waves change, and I'll explain. So between the ages of 1 and 7, the baby sleeps for 6 months because they're in delta brain waves. Then later on, they go to alpha brain waves. You are very programmable in delta and alpha. There is no cognitive filter for the child to say, it's not going to happen to me. So whatever they're seeing or whatever they experience becomes their reality. And where does that get stored? A copy gets stored in the brain and a second copy in the body. Candace Perth, I believe she won the Nobel Prize, proving that the body is the subconscious mind. So every cell of your body has part of that emotion stored. And where are the memories stored? Between 2 neurons. I'll explain to you how you can prune those 2 neurons. So now you already have a filter based on your experience as a child and certain beliefs you acquired unwillingly, what's going to happen in the world. So if you grew up in where everybody drank, there's a good likelihood you're going to drink. There are the few. Sometimes the soul is a little different and saw the pain of the alcoholic, and they will do everything to not become an alcoholic, but they often go through the stage and they heal it. So there's usually that option. That happens often enough. Or they will do the opposite because the pain was so big, but somehow they had someone in their family or something in their environment that showed them the contrast. Because in this reality, we learn by contrast. Let me tie it in with methadone maintenance or even alcoholism. Why does the person take drugs or shoot heroin? They know it's bad for them. Afterwards, they feel crappy. It's not that they feel great. But the moment they're doing it, they get a high. And the reason they need the high is because the emotion they're feeling, they have no coping skills because we were not taught how to feel their emotion. So it's better for them for the 10 minutes to get the high for the heroin or half hour actual, whatever it is, versus feeling that emotion because in the beginning you can't get out the hamster wheel, the looping thoughts, those endless nights that you can't go to bed. What happens to you when you can't go to bed? Your brain is in beta brainwaves. That's why you're looping and you can't fall asleep. You need to be in delta.
That's just something that's a mind-blowing experience right there. Just to be thinking that there's an emotional way around this. Let's start to get a conclusion here. What would you say to someone first starting that notices that they loop, that notices that they're constantly thinking about the same thing, that they're not able to let go of it? What would be the best bet for somebody just trying to get over something like that?
Similar to something you've said, but I would add, if they can observe or feel the emotion without the story. So let the energy move. And then consciously make an effort to stop the thoughts, the negative thoughts. Because the negative thoughts are looping and feeding the emotion, and it becomes a cyclical loop. So, okay, I'm afraid. I look around. I am safe. Let me feel. And it's not going to be easy in the beginning. Let me feel this fear, and it's going to go by. I'm angry. Okay, so whoever got me so angry is not in front of me right now, let's say. Okay, let me stop the story, what he did to me, how dare he do it, and all these things, because that's creating neurotransmitters and neuropeptides that are going to feed the emotion. And let me just, where is it in my body? Put my awareness on it. Just feel it. You want to hit a pillow? Go ahead and hit a pillow on a chair. Don't go and hit a person. And I don't suggest call the person and start cursing them. I do not recommend any of the two. Just feel it. Just observe it. And they will see over a short period of time, it's going to leave. In the beginning, it's not going to leave as fast. And it's going to be a practice stopping the thoughts. That's why meditation is so helpful. Because the crazy thoughts keep on coming by, and in meditation, you learn to let them go, and eventually they stop for 20 minutes or half an hour. Yeah. And you change your brain waves by not engaging in your thoughts. So the key is the brain waves. We want to shift our brain waves. In beta brain waves, there's not a possibility you're going to heal, not a possibility you're going to see a solution. No possibility for anything, because that is designed to protect you out of danger.
So we want to be, and when we're awake, we want to be in alpha.
If you can go into theta, that would be great. Now, apparently, in meditation, some people can be in delta, which means they're not asleep. So their body is asleep, but they are awake. That is for more advanced, but for us, alpha and theta. And alpha is what they use for hypnosis. That's what they use. Alpha brainwaves. That's how you get hypnotized.
Wow. Okay. So this is all amazing. And like you said, there's advanced ways to get around this, but our first step would be I find an EFT practitioner like yourself and start getting an education and some clinical practice with it. Where would be the best place for people to talk to you specifically?
Okay. So they can come to my website, tapintourbestself.com. I also have a blog with lots of articles, and I want to emphasize something about EFT. So EFT is not like therapy that we want to keep the client forever. I personally actually teach the person the tools so they can do it on their own. So when I work with clients, they may have 2 sessions a week, but they've been taught how to tap by themselves in between the sessions. And I usually recommend minimum 20 minutes a day that they learn how to self-regulate, because it's about regulating your body. I'm pretty sure you give them skills, similar skills like I do, to practice, because this is not about a dependency. This is about an empowerment for them.
Yes. And yeah, when I teach clinics and stuff, it's the same thing, right? They have an 8-week clinic. I teach them the skills they need to do to get that, whatever they're coming to me for, so that they don't have to come to me anymore. Then my coaching is a little bit different, but that's specific for people that are habitual racers. That's just on my practice. But for you, I love that idea. I love that. Hey, listen, you're going to come, we're going to do 20 sessions and you're done, because I'm going to teach you how to do it for yourself.
Right. And I also teach the course, which is the Change Your Mind, Create New Results, because knowledge is the precursor for experience. So I want them to understand how their brain and body works.
Excellent.
So now they have more control why this is happening. And if you've noticed today, I tried as much to give supporting information, because to say it works, they're just going to get the placebo, and the placebo without knowledge is not good enough. You need to know why it works. That actually, research has indicated that when the person knows why it works and how it works, then you're going to get better results.
You have just proved my point to any of my clients. So I always tell them the same thing. I give them a workout and stuff, and and I tell them why. Like in the workout, it says objective. This is why you're doing this, and this is how we're going to go about it. And they ask me, why am I doing this? I'm like, I can tell them. And I've got some clients that are like, hey, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I'm like, and they get upset with me when I sit there and tell them, this is why we're doing it, and this is blah, blah, blah. They like, well, coach, I don't need to know. I'm like, yeah, you do. I says, you might not think you don't want to know, but you want to know. And when you do know and you execute the workout, the recovery process, whatever they're executing, I says, you're going to execute it better. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. What I am going to do is I'm going to make sure that it tapintourbestself.com. I'm going to have that in the show notes for you. So go ahead and link there. And then those courses you mentioned are on the website?
Yes, it's under my services. I have it's called NCS, and they can select if they want to do it by themselves. Do they want a second person to do it with them? And they can buy, it's under services, and they can get whatever it is that they want. Yes.
Yeah.
My goal is here to empower everyone out there, because what is the collective? It's a version of you pushed out, right? You're seeing the collective based on your own experience. So the more people heal, we're going to have a better future for ourselves to live. So it's a win for all.
Yeah. And you know that people are holding on to these emotions a lot longer than they should. All you have to do is watch TikTok, and you can tell there's millions of people out there that can benefit from some EFT and learning how to let go of those toxic emotions. So tapintourbetterself.com and tapintourbetterself.com/services is where you'll be able to tap into your best self, right? Tap into your best self. And again, that's all going to be linked there. And do you utilize social media at all?
Yes, I have Instagram. It's called Tap Into Your Best Self. And then I have Facebook, which is tapintourbestself.eft.
Okay. So I'm going to make sure that those are linked as well. so anybody can get hold of you. If you have any questions, check out her content. And then if you still have questions, go ahead and slide into Sophia's DMs and ask her a question. But Sophia, this has been so enlightening. Just the scientific / emotional connection that you made for a lot of us, I think is absolutely the most important thing that we can think about, especially in the environment that we're living in today. So you keep doing what you're doing and bringing it to as many people possible, because I think it's so important. It's just so important. So again, thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much. I can't even tell you how riveting and how excited I am now. And I hope the rest of you are all too.
I want to thank you for allowing me to be on the show. I also want to add 2 things for your audience. Every problem has its solution. There's always another way out, not the one that we're always being fed. And the body in the right conditions is meant to heal. And every person, no one's excluded, has the same capability. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what you ate. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. The body wants to heal under the right condition. The same way when you fell off your bike, you got the scab on your knee. You didn't sit watching it. You just knew the scab was going to close and the wound was going to close. So I just wanted to say that to your audience, because I want to give them a story of hope versus a story of limitation that we keep on hearing 24/7.
And with that, I cannot say anything any better than that. So thank you so much again, Sophia. And thank you all. And we'll see you in the next one. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.